Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's we'll be comparing the hybrid 4Runner to the non-hybrid 4Runner to see if the hybrid is actually worth purchasing. Before we get into this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Larry H. Miller Toyota here in Murray for giving me some time with both these 4Runners. I'll include a link to their website in the description down below. Also include a link to my car buying guide. If you have any questions, just ask for Isaac. Let's get into it. So powering the non-hybrid is a turbo 2.4 liter 4-cylinder that goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy is 19 around town, 25 on the highway, with power outputs being 278 horsepower and then 317 pound-feet of torque. Powering the hybrid is that same exact engine, but with a hybrid component added to it, so it goes through an 8-speed. Now, this gets 23 miles per gallon around town, 24 on the highway, so a little bit more around town, but then a little bit less on the highway, actually. Power outputs with this are 326 horsepower and then 465 pound-feet of torque. Now, before we move forward with this comparison, I do want to mention if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Now, unlike the Tacoma, every single 4Runner comes with the air dam at the bottom, whether it's hybrid or non-hybrid. So that's not one way that you can tell the difference. And by the way, very easy to remove. Now, the hybrid, of course, is going to have the iForce Max badge, whereas the non-hybrid's not going to have anything. Now, a big difference with the hybrid versus the non-hybrid is going to be the cargo area. So this is the non-hybrid. You can see that the load floor sits pretty darn low, and there's this little lip here. Pay close attention to that. So you've got quite a bit of vertical space. Now, if we pop over to the hybrid, look at that same lip, and the load floor now sits a good, what, 3-4 inches above that. Now, there's a little storage area underneath that little part, but the rest of it is, yeah, battery. And so this does get in the way of vertical space quite a bit. I mean, if we're talking, what, like maybe 1.5 inches there below, and then what, 3 to 4 above, that's a pretty substantial difference, right? Well, I should probably have brought a tape measure, but we'll just say like 5.5 inches with that versus that. So like, that's the difference between being able to fit tires in the back of a car versus not. And I know that because I own a Land Cruiser, not that specific one, and I cannot fit tires in the back of that Land Cruiser because there's just not enough height. Now, another big difference is weight. So the non-hybrid has 895 pounds of payload capacity. Gross vehicle weight rating is 6,395, meaning that this vehicle weighs, let's say, 6,400 pounds minus about 900 pounds. You're talking about 5,500 pounds in vehicle weight. Now, the hybrid has the same exact payload, 895, but 6,505 is the gross vehicle weight rating. So you subtract the payload there, and you're going to get about 5,600 pounds. So it's not like an insane weight gain, but it does weigh a little bit more. Now, this leads us into the pricing difference. So these vehicles are pretty similarly equipped. Obviously, the non-hybrid is a Tier D Sport, whereas the hybrid in this comparison is a Tier D Off-Road. But the Tier D Off-Road and Sport are pretty much the same price, especially when you spec out option to option. They're very similar to each other. So that Tier D Off-Road is $54.5. The Tier D Sport is $51.5. So it's about a $3,000 price premium for the hybrid, which is a decent chunk of change, and that pretty much erases any money that you'd save with the improved fuel economy from the hybrid. So let's take them out and see which one drives the best. TRD Off-Road with the hybrid. And it's interesting to see that the hybrid with the new 4Runner doesn't, I mean, obviously the talk is this powertrain is not about fuel economy, but it's still interesting to see that it doesn't change the fuel economy all that much. Now, I have a new Land Cruiser, so you know, I know some of the benefits of the hybrid. One of the big benefits is, you guys will see the power. Also, when you're going at low speeds, you just don't use gas often because it'll typically just use the electric power, and you're stopping and starting enough to get enough regen. It's got some power. It's definitely got some power. Now, because this is a part-time four-wheel drive system, that means that you're going to have less power loss compared to a full-time four-wheel drive system. Wow, that's actually quite impressive, because you're only sending power to 2 wheels. So that actually does benefit things quite substantially. Man, this thing's a torque monster. It's actually very impressive. Yeah, suspensions. Pretty nice on this Tier D off-road too. Something that I've noticed is, seems like the springs in the platform are not necessarily that much more important than shocks, but it seems like they're almost a little bit more important than the shocks you have in a car in terms of on-road performance. Off-road, yeah, completely different story. But on-road, if you've got good springs and you've got a well-built platform, then things ride pretty comfortably. So it still feels like a truck, but it's actually pretty comfortable over all the bumps. Yeah, it's definitely not bad at all. Yeah, I do like how this drives. And again, the low end is where this hybrid really shines. The top end, not so much, but on the low end, I feel like I just have so much shove. It's just like go, go, go. It's really, really good. And there you go, it's off. See, like this is an example. So in the non-hybrid, you're gonna be using the engine still to go through here, whereas this, you know, for a few moments, right, saves you a little bit of gas. It adds up. It adds up over the life of a car, and it puts less stress on the engine as well. So that was cool. That was cool to see. Like, this thing feels genuinely quick. It's actually quite impressive, if you ask me. So Tier D off-road with the hybrid might be the 4Runner sweet spot. Interesting. The non-hybrid sounds slightly different than the hybrid. It's the startup, at least in the non-hybrid, it almost sounds like slightly higher pitched. Like the hybrid seems like it has a slightly deeper tone. As weird as that sounds, I'm wondering if it's the starter, the alternator. I think that it's just higher pitched and weird. Huh. Super weird. So this is an important comparison, very important comparison, because a lot of people are debating, like, do I give up the cargo space? Do I give up the cargo space? Do I pay the extra money? Is it actually worth it? So when it comes to acceleration, this still feels quick, but there is a lack of torque on the low end compared to the hybrid. You do feel the difference, even though this is a lighter vehicle, right? So it's not like you're getting a true, like, I mean, you're getting a big power increase, but you know, you have your vehicle with more power, right? So it's not just like a one-to-one addition. But yeah, right off the bat, it does feel like it's I just feel like I have less torque with it. And then also in the hybrid right here, the engine would be off. Versus with this, any of these people can let me, okay, thank you. You never know with Salt Lake people. Anyways, the engine would be off right now, but whereas this, it's constantly running. So you're gonna use up, it's a very marginal amount of fuel, but you're gonna use up a little bit more fuel with the non-hybrid that way. And that's why a lot of the benefits of the hybrid fuel economy wise are around town, and you actually lose fuel economy on the highway because, you know, slightly, I think it's because the car's a little bit heavier. And on top of that, the hybrid doesn't really give you that much extra performance at the top end. It's the low end. Yeah, there's a big difference in the low end, but the top end, they don't feel too different from each other. They actually feel very similar when it comes to overall performance. So, fuel economy, I don't think it's worth getting the hybrid if you're looking at the fuel economy, because 19 versus 23, 4 miles per gallon. I mean, yeah, that is a difference, but also, what, 3,000, 3,500, however much the hybrid is more. I mean, that's a lot of money to have to make up, right? And gas costs. But Toyotas, you know, they last a long time, so you probably will over the lifetime of the car if you keep it long enough. And then, like I said, you know, the hybrid's gonna keep the engine under less stress. But yeah, if you're just purely looking at it from a fuel economy standpoint, yeah, it probably doesn't make sense. Now, power, it does, especially if you're gonna do a lot of around town driving. Now, if you're actually gonna do a lot of driving on the highway, then yeah, the hybrid actually doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't really give you that much. It doesn't give you more passing power. I can tell you that from my experience with my Land Cruiser. Passing power is still pretty awful. But yeah, that's just not going to make sense. So if you're doing mostly highway driving, then I would say non-hybrid makes more sense. You're going to get pretty much the same fuel economy, and you're gonna have the same passing power with it. And so I could see, if you're doing tons of around town driving, the hybrid will, you know, kind of just be a better experience, right? This has a lot of low end torque. Like, it's got, like, when I push in the pedal, it's got a good push, but the hybrid has that extra just instant torque that it's a lot more drivable. It's a much better experience around town. So I'd say, yeah, around town the hybrid makes a little bit more sense. And so putting it all together, should you go hybrid? Should you go non-hybrid? And, you know, actually I'm gonna go on the other side. My personal take, if you have the money, I do think that, again, around town, you're really gonna like the extra performance, and it's not that much cargo space that you're losing. And I think especially in the higher end packages, like, yeah, I think it's worth the extra money. Now, that being said, if you're looking at, like, hey, do I get an SR5, right, that without the hybrid, or do I go for a Tier D off-road with the hybrid? Well, then that's a completely different question. Like, if you're just looking at all at value, I think the best new 4Runner to buy is actually, again, that one that I reviewed the other day, SR5 with no options. You just put some nice all-terrain tires on that, and that is a great vehicle for every use case. But if you're looking at the higher end packages, I do think that the hybrid has quite a bit of utility to it.